Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is doom scrolling. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. What is doom scrolling? I'm going to tell you. Doom scrolling is a term that I came across. You know what? I think I probably was pretty familiar with it, but once I read the term and read the definition and examples of it, then it really kind of hit home. But I came across this article, and it described, doom scrolling and how it actually adversely affected us. And the article, it describes doom scrolling as basically seeing bad news and reading bad news and being consumed with bad news and then almost seeking more bad news. As many of you do, I have, social media accounts from Facebook to Instagram to the Twitter X and the Tiki of the Talk. I'm all over the place. And naturally, when you're on these social media platforms, you're going to see news, you're going to see information, you're going to see stuff, if you will. And a lot of times, the stuff that we see, the stuff that we read, really isn't good for us. It's not good for our mental health. And I think a lot of this really became prevalent during the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. I remember distinctly during the pandemic, I want to say it was 2020. It was December 2020 because for my birthday, I went to LA. And at that particular time, LA was like ground zero for the pandemic and COVID. And what I started doing was just kind of getting an idea and feel for LA, because I've been to LA before plenty of times. But I mean, like, I wanted to know like what was going on in LA. So I started reading the LA Times online. And in the upper right-hand corner of their webpage, it said COVID deaths or COVID cases. And there was a pie chart, and there was another pie chart next to it that said COVID deaths. And I found myself reading and looking at that chart every day that I would go to the LA Times. And it wasn't anything that I was doing conscious, but I think what I was doing was I was trying to get myself information because at the time that I went out there, again, LA was COVID central. Like, I mean, LA was shut down. Like when I got to my hotel, it was nothing. My hotel had a couple of restaurants in it. There was no restaurants open in the hotel, and like you could order room service, but that was about it. Like, it was dropping your food off like in a spot. You had to go get it. Like it was just different. I mean, don't get me wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. Traffic was less. I rode around places and saw things in LA that I probably wouldn't have normally gone. Went to a couple of hoods that I probably shouldn't have been in, riding through, not stopping. But nonetheless, I wanted to kind of get a feel for where I was going. And so I did my research as far as places to go, stuff to do or whatever. And plus I hung out with my boy Jay Fresh, who lives out there. And but anyway, long story short, I found myself daily looking at those numbers. And those numbers were astronomical as far as cases reported. And this was before the vaccine. So, people were checking up out of here with COVID. And so I think one of the things that I learned from that was like, I can go, at one point I had to tell myself, you can go to that website without looking in that top right-hand corner, right? And you can do that and get a peace of mind. But I mean, at that particular time during the pandemic, you guys know, I mean, COVID was everywhere. I mean, like it was a constant talk about it on the news. And if you weren't careful, you were going to, really overindulge in that information. And this is what people call doom scrolling. I mean, doom scrolling is, the term comes from doom, which signifies disaster, destruction, and end. The end is near. Obviously, fear. And scrolling is what we do on our phones. but like I said, it really came to fruition during the pandemic. And I think, it made me personally realize just how much information I was consuming and where I was getting that information from. Now, I think I'll use Twitter X for an example. We all use Twitter. Almost everybody that I know has a Twitter account. And if they don't have a Twitter account, they have a Facebook account. And if they don't have a Facebook account, they have an Instagram account. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think ultimately what happens is that you have to be mindful of the information that you consume on those particular sites. Now, here's the thing. I've been on Twitter. I was on Twitter like since 2007, maybe 2006. I literally was on Twitter before most people. I was on Twitter. When I got on Twitter, the tweets were so infrequent that I would get text messages anytime somebody sent a tweet, because you didn't tweet much. Like, you might send one tweet a day. I think at one point I was averaging like 7 tweets a week. My tweet might read, "Hanging out with the fellas at the bar," and that's it. And that's the tweet for the day. There's no talking about, this football game or this basketball game or what LeBron did. None of that stuff. Or what Kobe was doing or anything. It was just that. It was just one tweet. So the tweets were so infrequent, and Twitter wasn't a place like that. It wasn't a place where you could, for me, it was a place where I could connect and kind of virtually hang out with people that I knew or people that I didn't know, because I was blogging at the time. And it was a space where me and my blogger friends could hang out and talk to each other in real time. And then what happened was the rest of the world showed up. Y'all showed up and made it worse. And then you find yourself, people would follow you, and then, what you would do, you follow them back. But the flip side in that is that whatever interests the people that you followed automatically became the stuff that you were interested in, or at least that's the way Twitter, considered it to be. So if I'm following Jay Fresh, and Jay Fresh, has his own political ideas, and let's say he's, let's just say he has his own religious ideas, and let's say he's an atheist, he doesn't believe in God, and he's tweeting and retweeting these tweets about God not being real and God being fake and the world is coming to an end and whatever. Then now all of a sudden, because I follow him, I'm seeing that stuff. And that's not how I feel, about religion, but that's his opinion. And that's now his opinion has become reality because he's a part of the stream that's being fed into my timeline, because he's retweeting it. Now, he's not saying, hey, he's not adding me, but because we're on the same timeline, this is information that I'm seeing. And so over a period of time, and especially with the more people that you followed, because I remember at one point in time on Twitter, I said I never wanted to follow more than 100 people, because I didn't think I could keep in touch or keep up with more than 100 people. And that thought process sounds so small at this point. But I will say this much. I think I probably enjoyed Twitter a whole lot more when I had 100 followers as opposed to the, 1,900 followers I have now. Or how many of them follow? I don't even know how many followers. It's close to 2,000. But here's the thing. I don't know 2,000 people. I don't. And I damn sure don't need to be contacting with or connecting with 2,000 people. But it's just grown over a period of time. It's people that you follow, people that you know, so forth and so on. But more importantly, as the article refers to, like, how we consume news and how we consume images, the brain processes negative thoughts quicker than anything else. And negative thoughts are intensified in your brain. Studies have shown that. And so, in essence, we remember these things more. And that could be the gift and the curse, to be honest, because that means whatever you consume, it stays with you longer. So we have to be very mindful about the information that we consume, particularly on our phones, because our phones are always on us. We always have our phones in our hands. We're always looking down, reading something, scrolling through something, seeing what's on the TL. And, over a period of time, it really becomes probably more harm than good. And I'll give you another example. And this is something that we've dealt with in our house. Um, I'm not a big fan of the news, particularly the local news. I'm not a fan of the local news because I personally think that the local news is set up to, you know, they're going to give you the local news, but just watch your local news. Depending on where you live, the first 5 stories are just tragic. House caught on fire, accident, somebody got shot, somebody got murdered. And I mean, if you live in a major city like I do in Atlanta, or even in Houston or Dallas or San Francisco or New York or LA, wherever you live, if you live in a major city, you're going to be inundated with that because it's more people, right? But if you go to a smaller place like my hometown of Florence, South Carolina, even that city and that area, the first news that you get, the first 10 minutes of the news is all bad news. Nobody starts off with a good news story. And there's a reason for that. But what happens here in my house is that my wife, Sharice, and I, we would have serious discussions. It's very serious discussions. Borderline argument. Not, I won't say arguments, but because she has a point and I have my point. But I'm not into being consumed with that first thing that I get up in the morning. I'm not. And I get it. She wants to check the traffic and the weather. I don't need to see the news for that. Well, I'm a little bit spoiled because too, I work from home, so I don't have to deal with traffic. Most traffic I have to deal with is when I take the kids to school or something like that. But I don't have to, get in the car and drive across the city like I did once before. But the flip side of that is, she does. So she wants to know what the weather. I don't care about the weather because the weather's going to change. I can access it from my phone. It's not like I can't get to it, right? So I don't need the news for that. But she likes to get the news and the weather. And then, but if you're watching the news first thing in the morning, guess what you're going to see? We have a shooting at the 400 block of Peterson Street. Man got murdered, blah, 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 blah. And that's constant. And I mean, think about it like this. You wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, right? And that's the first thing that you see. That's the first thing that you hear. I don't think that's good. I really don't think that it's good to be consumed with bad or negative information or news first thing in the morning. I just don't. Nobody can convince me otherwise. I'm sorry. Not sorry. It just doesn't make any sense to me because you still have, it's 6 a.m. and you just heard about a child that died in a fire. Somebody's house that got broken into, somebody that got shot and murdered the night before at a club. And now you have that on you. You have that weight of that information, and you got to take that weight and you got to go out of your house. And now you got to go get in your car and you got to drive to work. That's a lot to be on you before it's even 8 a.m. There's no telling what the stresses of the day will bring at work. You get to work and somebody, somebody didn't want to refill the coffee machine or something like that, or you left some lunch in there and somebody ate your lunch. I mean, or dealing with the coworker that's trying to stab you in the back. I mean, you could have any number of issues at work. And then you add that on top of the bad news that you got when you woke up. I'm just not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of it. So we had a discussion. We've had several discussions. I got to the point where I would just turn it off. I'd rather watch reruns of ESPN. I'd rather watch reruns of The Cosby Show, A Different World, The Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, whatever. I'd rather get that in the morning as I'm moving around because naturally you're up, getting ready, getting kids ready, you're eating, whatever case may be, go to the gym, whatever you're doing, right? But I would much rather do that than to consume that type of information because, I think that stays on you. Now I know what you're thinking. Well, how are you going to get the news? How are you going to know what's happening? There's ways to do that. I mean, you could look it up on your phone later. You could get information later. But I'm not a fan of being consumed with that information early in the morning. And you know what? The number one thing that most of us do, myself included, we roll over. The alarm clock goes off. We roll over, hit the button, and then if we don't get out of bed, we start doing this. We start scrolling. I mean, like, it's natural. But I think even then, you have to be mindful about some of the stuff that you view. Like, I've gotten to a point where it hadn't happened a lot, but it's happened a couple of times. People that I know have retweeted stuff into the timeline where, a cop murdered somebody, an innocent black man or woman, or somebody got into a fight. I'm done with the fight videos. I stopped watching fight videos a long time ago. If you want to send a fight video, don't send it to me. Because I just don't like seeing people just... Now, if you're in a boxing match, okay, that's different. You're trained, somebody who's trained to fight. That's different. But just two girls fighting over some dude in the street, no, I don't want to see that. I don't. And I just keep scrolling. And there's been times where there have been people who have, retweeted deaths into the timeline. I blocked them. When I see something like, even before it happens, if I see it look like somebody about to get shot, I stop the video. I go to whoever sent it, and I block them. Because I don't need that type of... Because, see, here's the thing, and I tell my kids about this all the time, especially when they started using social media. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. Once it's consumed within you, you can't get rid of it. Once you get news, particularly bad news, you can't push it away. And I think a lot of times, bad news is recycled into our phones. It may not be done purposefully, but it's done nonetheless. And if we're on our phones all day, we're going to be consumed with that. And that's what doom scrolling is about. It's about consuming that. And then there's some people that wake up and they literally and figuratively are looking for bad news to read. Who does that? To me, that's insane. Why would I want to wake up and read bad news? And honestly, that puts more stress on your brain than you can ever imagine. Studies have shown that reading distressful news, it affects the levels in your brain. It can interrupt your sleep. It can keep you from sleeping a good night's rest because you're worried about something happening. I don't worry about a lot of stuff. I'll be honest. I'm probably a little too carefree, if you will. But I'm not into stuff like that. And I'm not into watching stuff that affects me. And even with my phone sometimes, if I'm on Facebook or if I'm on Twitter and I'm scrolling and I start seeing bad news after bad, I'm like, all right. And there's something that says in my head, all right, Kyle, shut it off. Put it down. Get out of the app. It's enough. It's enough for the day. And I'm happy that I've gotten to that point, because I think a lot of times, particularly for people who are under a lot of stress, that's very harmful. It's even more harmful for people who are depressed. Now, I'm not somebody who's depressed, but I know people who suffer from depression. There may be some of you watching or listening that suffer from depression. If you do, I would strongly advise you to watch what you consume. I mean, it's like somebody overweight, worrying about their weight, and then walking into a buffet. You're not doing yourself any service like that. You're really not. You got to protect your mental peace. You got to protect your mental health. You have to make sure that you can control the images, the news that's being fed into the box, into the brain. Because if you don't, what are we doing? You're turning yourself loose to the world. And the world has shown you time and time again that it don't care what it feeds you, because it's going to keep feeding you and feeding you and feeding you and feeding you. And you got to be mindful about the stuff that you take. Again, I'm not someone who is going to take in a whole bunch of bad news. And I mean, that's what doom scrolling is about. The article also says doom scrolling affects people differently, but studies have observed a link between excessive consumption of bad news and higher rates of depression. Stress and other symptoms are similar to those found with post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, that's real, man. And again, that's a level of stress that is on the brain. Again, I think the media feeds into it. At the time of this recording, we're coming into it's going to be election season. I'll say this without even diving into politics, because I don't talk politics on this podcast. I think one of the things you have to be aware of is talking points, right? If you listen to a politician talk, they will give you the skinny, which is the bread on the top piece of bread. And then they'll give you the middle, which are their talking points. And then they'll give you the skinny again, which is another small piece of bread. Now, a lot of times people listen to the skinnies, the top and the bottom of the bread. And they don't really focus on the middle, because the middle is just talking points. And the talking points, honestly, are all the same. No answers, just cliches and slogans. Well, we're going to get tougher on crime and we're going to secure the border. I mean, okay, but tell me how. We're going to bring these jobs back. Okay, how? You can give me all the statistical data that you want. You can tell me how. You can tell me that crime went down 30% in the city, but how are you going to make it safe? Because see, I get beyond the bread. I want to get to the middle, right? And I need you to tell me, Mr. or Mrs. Politician, I need you to tell me, like, what's the real? And how are you going to do it? I know that it needs to be done. It's just like if you go outside of your home and you see trash on the ground, and you say, oh, we need to clean up the trash on the streets. Okay. That's a given. How are you going to clean the trash up off the streets? Are you going to come pick it up? Or are you going to send somebody to come pick it up? Are you going to have somebody pick it up every other day? Are you going to galvanize the community so that we make sure the trash isn't on the streets? Okay. I mean, those are just suggestions, but hey. So even with politics, my only advice to you would just be to get beyond the talking points and get to the how. Because everybody's going to feel, I don't care what party you're in or affiliated with. Everybody's going to give you something to chew on. But you got to make sure what it is you're chewing on. But even with the media, and particularly with election season coming up, it's going to be constant. It's going to be constant. I've talked on this podcast before about being bombarded with political ads. At the time of this recording, it's January. I don't know what it's going to look like by the time November rolls around. Because if the last election cycle was anything like this one, man, listen. It was so annoying to the point where you didn't even want to watch TV, because I couldn't even sit and watch Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy like I do every night. Because as soon as they go to commercial, it's 10 political ads. And I mean, it's the same story. But, again, that's my only advice as far as the media is concerned, as far as, moving forward, because this is an election year. But ultimately, doom scrolling is very unhealthy for you. There's some ways to combat it. In conclusion, I would say you definitely need to combat it by knowing how to stay up to date with what's going on in the world without being overwhelmed by what's going on in the world. I mean, you can know about the war in Iraq without getting details every single hour about the world in Iraq. You can know what's going on CNN without physically watching CNN all day, every day. There's really no magic formula to turning it on and turning it off. You just have to be cognizant about how much of it is that you want to consume. If you feel like you're consuming it a lot, most phones, including the iPhone, for those of you who are in technology like me, I know for a fact the iPhone has, you can have parameters on your apps. I can set up an app, like let's say if I got the CNN app, and let's say the CNN app is my go-to every day, I can set up something where I'm only spending 30 minutes on the CNN app a day. 30 minutes, that's it. And so that's a couple of scrolls and then that's it. Or you can spend, 20 minutes on Twitter and you can basically lock your phone like that. And it'll say, okay, you've reached your limit of time on Twitter for today, and it won't let you go back on Twitter. You can do that. You can streamline your media and your phones to where you're getting news from certain sites, and you can streamline the news that you're actually getting. It's strictly up to you. But I think it's something you have to be mindful about. It's no different than being mindful about how much we eat because we might gain too much weight, or how much we drink because we don't want to become alcoholics, how much you smoke, you don't want to become a crackhead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to combine smoke and crack. You get what I'm saying. But I think it's really about being cognizant of it, being aware of it, and being in the mindset of I'm not going to let this stuff consume me. Because if you think that if you don't think that it will, it will. I will promise you. And then you also have to be mindful of a lot of times it's not just CNN, it's not just Twitter X, it's our group chat sometimes. We all have group chats. I know I'm in several group chats, and sometimes the the stuff that gets posted in the group chat never makes it to your social media timeline, but you see it. Now, I'm one who's not really big on the gossip and stuff. So Shade Room and all of those other websites, TMZ, I could take it or leave it. I do have friends who sometimes forward that stuff. I don't watch it. I have this thing now with me, and it's been like this probably for the better part of the last 2 years. I don't watch like YouTube videos that aren't like quick. If you send me a video that's like more than 3 minutes, unless it's like a sporting event or something like that, I'm probably not watching. I can't do it. And especially if it's something controversial or something, no, I'm not watching. I'm not. I'm just not. And I don't have to give you a reason. Sometimes friends will say, oh man, did you see that video I sent you? No, I ain't see it. Why you didn't see it? Because I didn't watch it. And I'm not going to watch it because it's too long and I don't have time. Well, I got time. I just don't have time for that. And that's another thing. You also have to be mindful of how much time you spend, just viewing that stuff. And again, doom scrolling is something that we can control. It's strictly up to you. But you have to acknowledge that, this is something that's there and I can either choose to ignore it or I can run to it. And a lot of times people are running to it. And that's not healthy at all. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday at midnight. From time to time, we drop bonus episodes on Sundays at midnight. Make sure that you subscribe on all the socials, Twitter X, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, 12 Kyle, and 12 Kyle Podcast. And if you feel so inclined, hit us up. Throw us a couple of dollars. Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. Again, this episode, Doomscrolling. And again, thank you for checking out this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000.